afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our council meeting of Monday the 17th of October 2022. Just to remind you that an audio recording of this meeting will be made for minute-taking purposes, and it will last the length of the open meeting. The audio file will be available on the council website after the draft minutes have been circulated. I'd like to welcome our elected members. We have apologies from Councillor Melissa Rebbeck, Councillor James Stewart and Councillor Bronwyn Lewis. I'd like to welcome our staff in attendance, our CEO, Nigel Morris, Matt Atkinson, Acting General Manager of Growth, Andy Baker, General Manager of Infrastructure, Elizabeth Williams, General Manager of Resources, Trish Kirtland, Manager of Business Services, Tanya Cregan, Executive Assistant to the Mayor and elected members and the Minute Secretary and other members of our staff. I'd also like to welcome the members of the gallery, Georgina from the Southern Argus, Brian from the Fleurieu Sun and Sophie from the Victor Harbour Times. I'd like to acknowledge that Alexandrina Council and its communities acknowledge the Narrandjeri people as the traditional custodians of the lands and waters of our council district. I'd ask you all now to please stand for the local government prayer. Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee to grant thy blessing upon the works of this council. Guide us in our deliberations for the advancement and the true welfare of the people of the district. And while we're still standing, I'd just like to acknowledge the passing of Lorraine Pomery, OAM. Lorraine was twice Citizen of the Year in our council area. She passed a couple of weeks ago. We had a lovely service last Tuesday, and in memory of her, it was very well attended. Lorraine is the sort of citizen that you look around for and would love to have in every township. She's just such a special person, and she's going to be enormously missed. Her son has been working for council for 40 years, and he's also a member of us, a fantastic member of our staff. But just wanted to acknowledge Lorraine and her contribution to the Port Elliot community, but also the wider community, especially at this end of the Fleurieu. Lorraine used to run the St Jude's Art Show every year in Port Elliot, Christmas carols in the Institute, and were a fantastic, delightful event to go to because she made such a special thing of it. So, yeah, just wanted to acknowledge Lorraine and what she's done. So thank you very much. Just to remind elected members of your obligations under the conflicts of interest under Section 99 of the Local Government Act. Item 2, it's not got my memories all over the place here. So item 1 is confirmation of the minutes of our meeting held on the 19th of September 2022. There is a note there regarding a slight change to the wording of it. Is there a mover for that? Move Councillor Keeley. Seconder, Councillor Carter. Is there any discussion relating to the minutes? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Item 2 is adjourned debate. There is none. Item 3 is presentations and deputations. There are none. 4 is petitions. 4.1 is an objection to a proposed lease of the first floor of the Goolwa Aquatic building, and there's a recommendation that that petition be received and forwarded to the Acting General Manager of Resources for assessment and a response to the head petitioner. Somebody moved that, Councillor Carter. Seconded, Councillor Scott. So I'll put that to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Now let's go on index. So item 5 is questions with notice, and we've got 15 of them. So we go from 5.1 to 5.15. All the questions and all the answers are included in the agenda. So we move to, just going to get to the end of them all. 6 is questions without notice. Are there any questions without notice? Councillor Scott.
Yes, I have a couple. Thank you. 4 years ago, at this very meeting, Thank you. 4 years ago at this very meeting, I moved a motion that we, in consultation with the Narrandera Authority, that we engage in joint naming of key places of mutual interest. And that was carried by the Chamber with a view of raising the profile of Aboriginal culture in this area rather than just relying on a couple of statements at the beginning of meetings and that sort of thing, that people would live it. I have asked on several occasions throughout the 4 years what has been the progress, and I'm here at the end of this term asking the same question because I don't believe there's been one sign erected with joint naming on it as I had intended. So may I ask, where are we up to with this, and what can we expect after in the next term? That's the first question. There's another one to follow. Thank you.
Through the Chair, I'm well aware of that motion. That is something that we are working towards. You've requested a listing to see what we've done to date, and that's something I can take on notice and produce back to the November meeting.
Thank you. Secondly is in relation to some of the comment and promotional material in relation to the election. I realise we live in a world with free speech, but it is concerning me that there is either directly or indirectly inference that during this term we have acted with not necessarily the full amount of integrity that people would expect, particularly in relation to going to confidential matters of confidence, and my question is, can anything be done about that? Because it's actually reflecting on the council as a whole, on the staff, and the integrity of the staff and the integrity of the elected members. And I think it is totally inappropriate. As I recall, we have been under the guidance of a governance officer as to whether we need to be in confidence. A couple of times we've challenged that confidence and we've actually had it overturned, so we went out into the public arena, you might say. But to suggest that we are hiding behind confidence, I think is totally inappropriate, and I'm just wondering, can council do anything about that at all?
Through the Chair, I've just come from my CEO Performance Management panel meeting, and that was something that's been put into my KPIs to try and keep more staff out of confidence, and then when we do go into confidence, that it's fully explained the exact reasons why. So yes, something can be done about that.
Sorry, I meant about the public comment. Do we have any redress at all, or any way of combating that inference? Because it looks like we have not behaved with integrity, and I value my integrity fairly highly, and I've tried to act with integrity ever since I've been in this council, and to have it suggested by inference that I and we haven't been, I find offensive.
Okay. Through the Chair, if you believe that there's been inaccurate information put out into the community about yourself, then your procedure to do that is to report that through to the Electoral Commission of South Australia and raise that with them directly for them to investigate and act accordingly.
Any further? Councillor Maidman.
Yes, this is questions addressed to the CEO, and I know he has an email to act upon from a constituent at Strathalbyn concerning pool operation hours, extension of the season, and excuse me, and I'm led to believe that today the early swimmers were informed of a reduction in hours, a reduction in an increase in the forecast temperature, which would then therefore mean less swimming time. So is there some review coming? How did this happen? without any consultation with the users of the pool. So I'll leave that on notice, and hope you can answer those questions.
Anybody else? Questions? Councillor Keeling?
I'd just like to raise the long-term issue of the country roads. We've had particularly heavy downpours recently, and a lot of people don't understand which council, which roads are responsibility of the council and which roads are responsibility of the Department of Transport. However, we appear to be getting much worse than usual in regards to the condition of the roads. And is it because, the question to the CEO is because we don't have enough equipment, enough staff, or it's just completely got out of hand, or is there some way into the future where we can perhaps bring more equipment to bear on the condition of the roads?
Through the Chair, I think there was two questions in there. One was about Department of Transport and about their roads.
Well, I did notice recently on the, there was only one, but I'll expand it into two. I understand on the council website there is a list there of roads which are council responsibility and the ones that are, and not everybody knows that. And I discovered that the boundary roads around Strathalbyn are all Department of Transport. And so people might complain about North Parade, East and West Terrace and South Terrace, but they're not council roads. And of course the Long Valley Road, which is a continuous problem. So we do need to allow people to understand they can look that up. However, really the central question was how are we going to cope in this particular season with the condition of the dirt roads, knowing that we've got hundreds of kilometres of them, but they appear to be a little bit worse than usual.
Through the Chair, that's something that I can work with the Field Services Manager and the General Manager of Infrastructure to see what we can do in the coming months to address all those.
Any further questions? No, so we'll move on to 7, which is notices of motion. There are none. 8, which is administration reports. 8.1 is the Climate Emergency Advisory Committee minutes of the 5th of September 2022. And there's a recommendation that those draft minutes be received. Move Councillor Kermans. Seconded Councillor Carter. Any discussion about those minutes? Not. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 8.2 is the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting minutes of the 29th of September 2022. And there's a recommendation that those minutes be received. Move Councillor Maidment. Seconded Councillor Gardner. Any discussion relating to those minutes? Councillor Maidment.
Yes, I'm a member of that committee, and we quite often need to address cemetery matters, and they take up a bit of our time. And I think it's been suggested that there should be a cemetery advisory committee formed under Section 41, and I think that would be a very good idea. Excuse me, I think there's 11 cemeteries from memory, and some are in need of attention, and to have this committee with representatives from each area, we could keep on top of the work required at those places.
Councillor Scott.
Yes, I just want to comment on that Cemetery Advisory Committee proposal. I was rung last week about it and asked to give consideration to it. I tried to speak to a couple of our members of the Currency Creek Advisory Committee, which is, I guess, up until now is the advisory committee. I think it's the only one as such. But I personally think it would be a great idea, would give us a better overview of the needs of the cemeteries and a better, and as a result we'd have more chance of budgeting better for the cemeteries. And I've recently had a number of phone calls in relation to Kessel Road Cemetery, which sort of tends to fall between the rungs, and with a committee like this that wouldn't fall between the rungs and would be cared for in some way or another. At least there'd be some oversight of it. So I I think on behalf of our committee, we would welcome that happening. Thank you.
Any further discussion? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 8.3 is the Ratalang, Basham Beach and Horseshoe Bay Advisory Committee of and the Port Elliot Holiday Park. It's their meeting of the 18th of August 2022 regarding the Port Elliot Holiday Park. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Keeley and Councillor Gardner. Discussion? Councillor Scott?
Yes, if I may. This is fairly involved, quite a complex situation really, and it is one that is of great concern to the committee. I've been sort of contemplating, I tried to discuss it with my co-councillor who's not here and who's on that trust with us, and I haven't been able to discuss it with her, but I'm wondering whether it would be good if we could just hold all this over until we've had the next Basham's Beach meeting to hear the staff concerns and or their staff comments, and for us to further consider, bearing in mind what's been put forward, because there was some. The last meeting was a long meeting with a lot of consideration given to the concerns and the problems that were there or perceived to be there, and now we've had the replies back from our recommendations. And some of them have financial implications that we possibly didn't anticipate at the time when we were considering this at the said Basham's Beach Ratalang meeting. So I'm just wondering whether we should defer this until the next meeting and send it back to the committee to consider the implications of what they were suggesting. Just a suggestion, because there are quite a few moving parts in that whole thing.
Elizabeth might answer it. You can't defer it, but and you would need a formal motion, which you can't put up because you've already spoken to it. So if you wanted a formal motion to adjourn it, you should have come up with a formal motion straight away. So Elizabeth, do you want to answer that?
So through the chair, this recommendation is to receive the minutes of that particular meeting. There is still opportunity for elected members to reconsider at the committee consider some of the information that has been provided by administration, and potentially put forward a notice of motion to a future council meeting if you would like to enact or effect some of those changes.
Councillor Kerr.
Yes, I was just going to say that I was at that meeting and it was a lot of discussion, but when I look at the recommendation here, it is really just asking us to note the recommendations. I'm sure at the next meeting of the group, they'll be discussing a lot of it in detail. So at this stage, I think I support the recommendation.
Any further discussion? Clears it up. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. (8.4) is the Sugars Beach Murray Mouth Infrastructure Upgrade Project, and it's a summary of the public consultation. There's a recommendation there with 3 dot points. Moved, Councillor Carter. Is there a seconder? Councillor Keeley. Any discussion? No. The consultation's pretty self-explanatory. There was no doubt about it. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Anybody against? No, that's carried unanimously. So 8.5 is the short-term dry area applications for 2022, and there is a recommendation there with 3 dot points, and it lists the locations of the dry areas. A question, yep.
Is this the same as it was last year? Are we just replicating what we did last year? Or is it been altered, please?
Find out. Elizabeth will let us know.
Thank you. Through the chair. So these are the standard dry area that we put in place over this period.
So do we have mover? Councillor Gardner, did you want to move it? Seconded, Councillor Maidment. Is there any discussion? Councillor Coomans.
Thank you, Mayor Parkes. Look, I just had a question in relation to the Goolwa Oval. I noticed that the hashing is over the top of the railway reserve as well. Does that mean that that is also part of the dry area? Or I noticed when looking at the detail, it does say it's recreational areas only, and I suppose the railway line isn't. So are they exempted? Or does it mean any train passing through where there's alcohol being served, they're going to breach the dry area provisions?
So through the chair, the hashed areas on the maps do represent the dry areas and will be the maps that are publicly displayed in regards to the dry areas. I would say generally if a train is rapidly passing through a dry area, probably the police aren't going to spot them with the alcohol.
Any further questions or discussion? I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 8.6 is the request for a partial waiver of a land management agreement at 57 Waterport Road, Port Elliot. And there's a recommendation on page 165, it's in twice. Is there a mover for that? Councillor Scott, do you wish to move it or speak to it? Or?
Wish to move that we do not, I'm trying to quickly find it on here. Here we have land management agreement. That we support the recommend. Sorry. Can't hear the speaker. Which page is it, please? Oh, sorry. Yep. I move that the council does consent to a partial waiver, and in moving that I'd like to add that I have considered what the staff have said, taken on board. I've drove down there a little while ago to have a look, and I'm probably the only one in the room that remembers when that was all farming land and no houses. And Mr. Basham used to have his dairy there. And I can understand at that stage, all those years ago, why it was asked, it was built into the land management agreement that there just be what we'd call a cyclone fence, because it was farming land being turned into rural living. The world has changed considerably. Over the road was I can't think of his name, but he had cattle, and down the road Wilf Langham had his dairy, and all west of there was Mr. Thorpe had where all those houses are was all cattle. So you could understand that when we were coming to a land management agreement and it's going to be sort of subdivided, there was shock horror that Basham's was going to be subdivided anyway amongst the community, but now it is all different. And that person, it's a bit different from these people that buy a place and then complain about what's happening over the road, as we've had experience with more recently. These people are recognising what's happening over the road and are trying to do something about it on their own land. And I think that's an important difference. They're not saying that the wedding place over the Waverley should be closed down or restrict its trade or anything like that. All they're asking is, can we put up a wall so that when people are coming in and out of the coffee place, what's called, or coming down after the weddings late at night and cars turning out, they've got a decent sized wall to muffle the sound. Bear in mind that Waterport Road used to be a gravel road, which people would avoid. now it is a ring road for heavy vehicles. And as I respect what the staff have said and the view that they've taken, however, I think on the balance of just weighing it all up, I think we're drawing a long bow by suggesting that it is still farming land. You look down the side, there are fences all the way to all sorts of mixture of fences, and I think it's not unreasonable that we let these people put the fences up that they want to do, and that's why I'm moving in that direction.
Councillor Coombs, you want a second again?
Look, I am happy to second this. I've always been one that does believe in land management agreements, but this particular one goes back to about 1993, and I think it's probably, in this regard, it's probably served its purpose. The area around there is characterised by brush-type fences, colour bond, and some other types of fences, picket fences. And I can understand what the owner's trying to do. There's some noise barrier, probably a safety and a privacy barrier, and I think that's quite reasonable. And I guess one of the advantages is with a stone wall, which is going to be probably a significant cost, it probably sets the standard for any of the other properties who come under the land management agreement as well. The only thing, I guess, if I had anything, if I'd like to see a little bit of flexibility, that maybe a 6 foot high stone wall, maybe it could be lowered a little, and maybe something like a brush fence on top, just to add to the character of the visual effectiveness of it. And you know, if staff can talk about that flexibility with the owner, that would be good. So I don't have any issue with varying that land management agreement to allow this to happen, and I certainly support Councillor Scott on that. Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
Your Worship, I don't have a problem in one regard to the fence, but does this not, if we move this and it passes, does it not set a precedent?
Get Matt to give us an opinion on that. Thanks.
Thanks. Through the Chair. That's precisely the concern that staff have in this particular locality. The particular property in question is at the western end of the development on Waterport Road, where high fencing probably isn't a huge concern in this particular instance. The problem is it's that the same provisions that apply within the land management agreement that apply to that entire area that's covered by the land management agreement. So that would include all of the properties that have an open frontage along the Goolwa Port Elliot Road, and there is a number of them. So there are building envelopes as one level of protection, and the second one is to not have any high or solid fencing in the area. So the concern would be that if we're providing a partial waiver for this property, we would have to find some tangible reason as to why we wouldn't then allow it for the next one and the next one and the next one. And there may be spatially rationale to support it in this location but not elsewhere, but I think that you start to lessen the protections that we've got in place for that precise reason.
Councillor Keeley. Councillor Farrier.
Thank you. I understand what you're saying about setting a precedent. However, when I looked at some of the pictures and the graphics that you provided, there are a substantial number of properties adjacent to this particular property with old rusty iron fences, picket fences. So why aren't we saying to them, take them down? Right now, this seems like a major road. There's a commercial activity right across the road from them. You're now setting a standard of having a nice stone wall in front, which will set the precedence and the view for what people will aspire to. I think, as Councillor Scott has already said, we've moved on. This is a fairly major road. If you have a look on Google Maps, which I did, and look down there, it's a fairly major road. It's a heavy transport corridor, what I understand. I don't quite understand why you would not turn around and support this or have a problem with a half reasonable stone wall going up.
Any further discussion? Councillor Keeley.
I can understand what Councillor Scott's saying. It made a lot of sense. My question is more on the legal side of the fact there is a land management agreement on this title, and we're saying that we're going to ignore that. Do we actually have the authority as a council to do that? Can we say, no, we will allow you to go against the land management agreement, which is on the title, and enable you to put up a different structure? Wouldn't legally, and perhaps Matt can answer this, the land management agreement would have to be amended, or the title would have to be amended? Do we have the authority to just basically ignore that?
Through the chair, the short answer is yes, you do have the authority. There's a clause within most land management agreements, including this one, that enables a partial waiver, which is exactly what's being sought in this instance. It may be, though, if the council is of a mind to allow the partial waiver, there would likely be some merit, I suspect, in going out and looking at amending the entire land management agreement to protect the areas that we think still require protection, and then to potentially loosen some of those requirements. If it's Waterport Road with the additional traffic noise and the like, I can see that argument, and that may be something that we can investigate at a staff level.
Any further discussion?
Another question,
Councillor
Your
Gardner,
Worship.
then.
So if we go down that road, should we actually be moving the recommendation of Councillor Scott, or should we in fact wait until a staff's been able to sort the land management agreement out?
Through the chair, I don't think you would necessarily need to wait, but it's something, because whilst it's a first incursion into that zone of a partial waiver, any subsequent partial waivers would still need to come back to the chamber for endorsement. So there'd be an opportunity for us to be proactive and progress with potentially amending the land management agreement. The difficulty with that, though, is that there's many parties to that land management agreement. It's a large area, so that could be quite difficult. But this is right at the western interface of the land management agreement area, so those fences that sit outside of that aren't subject to the same criteria. I guess staff recommendations before you, we would suggest that you don't do it in that order. However, I'm not sure that there's an alternative, aside from getting, say, 80 signatures from 80 different landowners. It'll be very difficult to progress the alternative.
Councillor Maidman.
Question for Matt. So this particular stone fence is on the boundary. Was any consideration given to having it set back off the boundary, thereby it not impinging on this land management agreement? Was this something that the owners would consider? I do see what they're trying to do here to buffer the noise from that very busy road. There is a precedence being set with stone walls around near Liptrot Lane. There's a huge wall there. It's over 2 metres high. So we're going to get slammed with these this historical stuff for ad infinitum.
Through the chair, there is an opportunity for the owners of the land to establish an acoustic wall or a stone wall within their property boundaries. The land management agreement only talks about boundary fencing. There's also an opportunity to establish landscaping within that interim area as well to help soften or mitigate any noise that's coming from Waterport Road. But in terms of whether that's been provided to them as an option, I'm not aware if that's the case.
Any further? Before Councillor Scott, Councillor Maidman asked a question I was thinking of. That high stone wall, just by Liptrot Lane, is over 2 metres high. It's huge. So has that set a precedent that if we didn't approve this, these people could challenge that we've approved that around the corner?
Through the chair, no, that's not within the same land management agreement area. So that would have required approval on the basis that it's masonry and more than 1 metre in height. But if that had been, say, a colour-bond fence or a brush fence, then it wouldn't have required approval at all.
Mr. Scott, you wish to write a reply?
Thank you. I listened to what Matt has said and suggest that, put it to you, that the houses along the main road have a huge setback. There's considerable distance between there and the main road. I realise that this is right on the western end, and yes, we could be setting a precedent, but I also try to be realistic and look at things on their merits. And that house is directly opposite an establishment that has 100 to 150 people leaving there at midnight on a Saturday night when there's a wedding or other functions, and the lights come straight down, go straight in, and I can understand why they're doing it. I'm trying to appreciate what they're trying to achieve, and if you drive down Waterport Road, there is a collection of fences and motley hedges that have been used instead of high fences in that land management area as well. And I just feel that it's not inappropriate for us to bend it a little bit to allow these people to have a sort of at least a private yard without people. I mean, the cars parked outside there. I've been past there. We've all been past there, and there's almost traffic management situation out the front of their place, and all they've got is this little hedge, a little sort of light hedge, and I can understand why they're doing it, and I think we should show some sympathy for their situation with the coffee place and the wedding venue. Right at the lights had come down the drive and straight into their front room. And I think it's not unreasonable for what they're asking, so that's why I've moved it that way and seek your support for it. Thank you.
That closes the discussion. I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Anybody against? Against? Carried. Thank you. So, stick around, Matt, you might need you. 8.7 is the National Heritage Listing proposal for the Goolwa Men's Shed. There's a recommendation there before you, if you're not quite sure what that is, a little tin shed alongside the Customs House on that, when you're looking at it up Cadell Street on the right-hand side of the building. It's not used as a men's shed anymore, I don't think. They used to be there, but yeah. Councillor Gardner. The seconder, Councillor Maidment. Is there any discussion or questions relating to it? No. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Scott, are you with us at this stage? Or has the sec? Good, so we'll start again, so we all vote together. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 8.8 is the lease, lease and licence policy activities, July to September 2022, and there's a recommendation there that we receive and note the policy activities. Move Councillor Carter, seconded Councillor Maidment. Any discussion in relation to those? No, so I'll put that recommendation to you. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 8.9 is the Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre Authority. It's the 3-year business plan, 2022 to 25, and their strategic plan, 2023 to 2032. And there's a recommendation that we receive those plans. Moved Councillor Gardner. Seconder, Councillor Carter. Is there any discussion, Councillor Farrier?
A question, if I may. Or several questions, actually. On page 194, you have some indicators, and just so that I understand this correctly, with the operating surplus deficit ratio, in essence, are you saying that for the next 3 years, that we can expect to lose 25%, we'll have a loss of 25% per annum.
So, through the chair, that figure is stable across that 3-year time horizon, but it is indicating, yes, that the expenses will exceed the income.
Fine. And the other question then was the own source income ratio of 58%. Could you perhaps explain that? Because when I looked at the ratio, the ratios that you're putting forward there, the first one, actually, the operating surplus ratio says it's operating revenue minus operating expense. So it gives us an indication that money that we actually take in and money that goes out. So we're losing, for every dollar that we spend, we lose 25% of it. But then when I look at the own source income ratio, it talks about council's ability to fund operational expenditure through funding sourced by its own revenue-raising efforts, which seems very similar to the first one. But however, one is a loss of 25% and one is 58%. So there's a difference there of 42%, which is, the two numbers don't quite gel for me. Perhaps you can explain them a bit better.
Thank you. Through the chair. So the own source income ratio is used for a number of the subsidiaries to reflect the portion of income they're generating themselves. So it excludes the council contributions to those particular entities and shows what that facility is generating from its own income sources. And the benefit of that ratio is you would like to see over time the reliance on council contribution decreasing and the reliance on their own income streams increasing.
So when I go down to the appendix within the document and I look at council contributions, which is on page 207, I see for the next 3 years we start off with council contributions being $755,934. In 3 years' time, $813,760. So your comment of that we would like to see council's contributions going down is actually contrary. Our council's contributions are going up. I just wondered if you'd like to make a comment on that. And then also do that one first.
So through the chair, you'll note during that time horizon as well that the user charges are also increasing. So it's a proportionate movement, which is why in that front table on page 194, you see the surplus deficit ratio and the own source income ratio staying the same number.
But in essence, council's contribution is going to increase over at least the next 3 years. So that I thought one of the things that we were trying to achieve is that to reduce council's contribution or have it go down rather than go up. The other thing I'd like perhaps you to answer is when I look at assets, can you tell me why our cash and cash equivalents are substantially decreasing? They've gone from $707,939 down to, in 3 years, predicted to be $477,000. So there's a substantial drop in council assets. And then when I also turn around and look at where are we? Our equity in this swimming pool is decreasing. Why would our equity in the swimming pool be decreasing by some $1.5 million over the next 3 years? given that it's a fully maintained facility. Property values are going up, our assets are going up. I would have thought that at least would have maintained its value, but I noticed that we're actually decreasing to the tune of $1.5 million.
So through the chair, the equity decrease is related to the ageing of the facility. So the equity is a portion of the facility value, and the facility value is decreasing over the years. Yes, we do maintenance and we do renewal, but that facility has a lifespan on it.
Any further discussion or questions? Councillor Keeley.
Yes, I understand this is a 3-year business plan, but I don't think it's acceptable. And I'm not going to vote for it because I think we need a better business plan. To lose 25% and have contributions that Councillor Farrier commented on earlier, that's disgraceful. The new North Ward where I live, hardly anybody goes to this pool because we're so far away from it. We've got our own pool, and we'll be subsidising a pool that we don't use to the extent of a loss of 25%. Now, I'm going to vote against it purely because I think, whilst I could vote to accept it as having received it, but I don't want to receive it, so I'm going to vote against it.
Councillor Coomans. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Park. Look, I think this is a wonderful facility, but it seems, and I guess we've got to accept this, that it's never going to break even. There are no plans by the management committee for it to ever reach a point of breaking even. So it's going to be a cost liability for the councils involved in it, and I guess we're never going to see an increase in income over the expenditure. So no matter what we do, that's not going to change. And you know, as much as I think that places like this ought to get pretty close to breaking even, or at least try and have a strategic plan to work in that direction, it doesn't appear it's going to happen here. So I think we've got to accept it. I'll support the recommendation because all we're asking is that we're receiving the 3-year business plan. We're not endorsing it, we're receiving it. So on that basis, I'll support it.
Councillor Scott.
Yes. I concur to a certain extent with all the previous speakers. However, this is an extraordinary situation. Very often you'll have a business and there's hardly a car parked out the front and it's going downhill, no clientele, and the poor business just finishes up folding. We've got a car park down there that is bursting with people, and we've got an asset that is costing us an increasing amount, and it is projected to cost us an increasing amount, and I'm fearful of where the back fence is, as just how much we are going to, and how our ratepayers will expect us for a limited number of people. When you look at the overall residents of Alexandrina, how much are they, I wonder what their expectations are of where we are supposed to stop subsidising it. It is an extraordinary situation because everything else, whether it's picking up your stray dog, which I'm reasonably experienced with, or anything else, it's supposed to be user pays. And yet in this situation, we have a facility that people say to me, isn't it marvellous? It is fantastic. And it is so cheap. People have said to me, it is so cheap to go there. And you look at the car park any time, except about 1 in the morning, the car park's full. So have we got the right business model? Are we charging enough? These are the things that I'm wondering, and I'm not involved with it, but from where I'm sitting, just on behalf of the people that I represent, I just wonder where we're heading. Well, I know we're heading at this stage, 750,000, $750,000. And, you know, if ever there was a group of people that are being subsidised, the people that use that pool are very much. And I know they enjoy it, but is it our role to subsidise them to that degree? I just asked that question because whenever there's a tender for subsidising anyone else, the chamber jumps up and says, oh, we can't subsidise anybody. Well, we're making a classic job of it there, and it worries me for the future council, whoever is in it, how we're going to manage that in another 4 to 5, 6 years, with it just the debt going up like that.
Any further discussion? Councillor Maidment?
Look, I concur with everything Councillor Scott said. We've been sold a crock here. When it was built, $21 million facility, it was supposed to turn a profit within, 5 years, I think it was touted by the people that scoped this project and did their fantastic business plans. It's been going for that long now and has not made a profit and will continue to not make a profit. And I understand if we were subsidising it to a lot lesser degree than we currently are, it would be more palatable. So I don't know how we can support the business plan here. But I think, as Councillor Cooman said, we're only adopting it, so... yeah, sorry? Oh, sorry, we're receiving it, yes, sorry. Yes, so I think we should receive it and have a serious look at how we can divest ourselves of this particular millstone.
Any further discussion? Councillor Keeley, you've already spoken to it. Question?
I have a question. The question is, how can we receive a business plan that we don't agree with? We can receive it, but that also then indicates to the people who prepared it that we accept it. So how can that be?
So through the Chair, Council has already endorsed the budget for 22-23 for the Aquatic Centre. Ideally at the time we would have had the business plan put forward with that particular item, but it wasn't. So this is the follow-up business plan. Council still has the opportunity each annual budget cycle to consider the financial position that the authority is putting forward and consider how you might want to alter that or request different outcomes.
Any further discussion? Councillor Gardner, do you want to close the debate? Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship. One of the things that we need to remember is that we've had COVID, and for 2 years we were absolutely smashed. In fact, we were closed a good bit of the time, and we're only just recovering. We're still nowhere near where we should be. The other thing that we need to remember is that we have had a major issue with the centre, with the executive officer. We haven't been able to keep an executive officer. So all the time we are fighting a losing, we've been fighting a losing battle. We've just appointed a new member of the board, Vicky Tomlinson, and we are doing our very best to make sure that the Aquatic Centre is in fact a viable organisation, a viable situation. But it has not been easy, and unfortunately the solar panels, which we were hoping would be put on by now, we are still working through that because the executive officer, of course, is new, is only just been appointed, and so he and his admin person are working through that right now. It isn't ideal. I absolutely agree, and we're not happy about the fact that it is a big impost on the council. But at this stage, there's nothing that we can do about that situation. We're doing our best.
That closes the discussion. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried. 8.11 is the confidential order review. There's various items. It's purely retaining these items Have I missed 810? Sorry. 810 is the Fleurieu Regional Waste Authority appointment of a board member, and there was a recommendation there before you. Move, Councillor Scott.
I'm happy to move that. I was on the board when Andy was representing Yankalilla Council, and as I've said before, I think he works with a very sharp pencil and will be an asset to the board. So I'm very happy to nominate him. Thank you.
Councillor Carter, you seconding it? Any discussion? Councillor Coomans.
Look, I don't have any problems with Mr Baker. I'm sure he's will be a very competent member. But what I don't know is, I guess, in relation to all of the other members, what their skill sets are, and whether to complement the total skill set of the board, an elected member at some time ought to be back on that board. Not this time. I think it's for 4 years. Okay. Is there an opportunity in coming years to appoint other members and maybe to appoint an elected member on there?
Through the chair, at the moment the recommendation is for a period of 4 years, but there's nothing to stop you rescinding that and moving an elected member on it in the future if you so wished. Or the other option is that you reduce the number of years from 4 to the number that you wish.
Could I ask a question first? Whether is there any opportunity for an elected member to be appointed, not instead of Mr Baker, but for another vacancy?
As I recall, we had a board member, we had an elected member on there at one stage, from each council. Is that correct, Elizabeth? Elizabeth will know the background. That's what I recall.
So through the chair, recent changes to the Farrier Charter, or relatively recent changes, allow for one appointee per council. Under the last charter, we did have an elected member representative and an administrative representative, but it's moved towards a skills-based board. So it's one only.
I'm of two minds whether, in fact, to suggest maybe that it should be for 2 years and then reassessed in 2 years' time. Not because I've got anything against Mr Baker, but whether there might be an opportunity for maybe an elected member who has an appropriate skill set, we don't know yet, who may benefit that board.
You'd have to just foreshadow that as a motion. Yeah.
Okay, let me foreshadow that then.
Any further discussion? Shall I put the recommendation? All those in favour? Against? That's carried. So 8.11, that is the confidential order review. There's just a number of items there which are currently confidential, and it's just retaining those in confidence for a further period. Moved, Councillor Keeley. Seconded, Councillor Carter. Any discussion? No, the reasons why they're retained is explained in the item. So I put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. .12 is the Chief Executive Officer's report. The report's there, and there's a recommendation that report be received, and we also note the receipt of funding for the work on Nankita Road under the Special Local Roads Program. Is the move to Councillor Keeley. Seconder, Councillor Carter. Any discussion or questions of Nigel on his report? Councillor Maidment.
Yes, I'd like to ask the CEO to elaborate on the discussions around the Langon Creek Wine Trail. This has been talked about for quite some time, and I noticed you had a stakeholder engagement meeting, so how far has that been progressed?
Through the chair, we did go out and meet the committee. With that, we've got very positive people in the room wanting to move ahead with that. The next stage is that we've been meeting with the stakeholder group, and the next stage is to meet with the wider Langhorne Creek community to present the trail to them and get their feedback on it. So it's moving along nicely.
Councillor Scott.
I'm just commenting in relation to number 2 of the recommendation, and it is good to see the money coming in for Nankita Road. But I just want to draw attention to the fact that our roads are really suffering, and the one serious situation I think is the Mount Compass Goolwa Road. It is in need of some major work, and I'm just urging or requesting that the CEO or the our engineering staff pressure the government, because we have a holiday period coming down, a holiday period in front of us, and a lot of traffic on that road, and it is absolutely in a very poor state. It's a disgrace, and it's the main road coming into Goolwa from Mount Compass and Adelaide, and I just request and plead that we push the government as hard as we can for some work on that. There are potholes, bitumen breaking up, all that, and especially near Whispering Pines where Warren Jacobs lives. It's just a disgrace.
Councillor Coomans.
If I could add to that, one of the promises made 4 years ago that there would be some passing lanes constructed as part of that Mount Compass to Goolwa Road, and nothing.
Any further discussion? Councillor Keeley, you'll close the debate. Any further? No, it's just one thing. Nothing to do with this, but as you know, I chair the local government transport advisory panel, which distributes this money, $18 million every year, and it's 2/3 funding for a regional council. It's disappointing that we haven't had a road in it for 3 years. So this is the first one in 3 years. So we really need to, and Andy, we'll be looking for you to come up with a road or whatever, that's a significant road that needs work doing to that we can get under this program and save some money and fix the road at the same time, because it's a great opportunity when you're getting 2/3 of the money. Councillor Keeley.
I just want to thank the CEO for his report and comment that it's not only very thorough, but it indicates that he spends quite a bit of time out of the office and he's going out to meet people. And I had that reported back to me, and they do appreciate it. Thank you.
That closes the discussion, so I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Item 9 is council member reports. 9.1 is the Mayor's activity report for September 2022. A recommendation there that be received. Moved Councillor Carter. Seconder. Anybody going to second it? Councillor Keeley. Any discussion or questions relating to that report? No, so I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. 9.2 is council member activity report. We've got one from Councillor Scott. There's a recommendation that that report be received. Councillor Carter.
Can I just ask a question on the page 292? Is that really August or is that October? Because you've got August and September, and I'm just wondering if the next page, 292, is actually October.
It's still August, running right through to. Beg your pardon. No, it's part of September. Beg your pardon. Yes.
Okay.
It's just a typing.
Just
we fix that up. Just a typing thing. September. Is a seconder. Councillor Keeley. Any further discussion or questions regarding that report? Councillor Scott.
Yeah, there are a couple of things I'd like to mention because I was absent from the last meeting. I was away with the MDA. I'd just like to comment on, firstly, the Fleurieu Food Festival that I thought was tremendously well promoted and set up, and I actually went out to Copo Hall, and I just want to commend what they have done out there, and I don't draw attention to what they have done with the Copo Hall, which used to be the community hall but now in private hands. And there was quite a bit of staff involvement in the first place, I believe, in negotiating all that. And I just commend the staff for the outcome that's been achieved, and for the people that are now running it, and what a great community place it is. and also the fact that Fleurieu Food Festival was a huge success and a great initiative, and I look forward to next year, hopefully. The second thing I'd like to comment on is that I went to the schools judging day at the Royal Show, and I just want to draw attention to the fact that the two schools in our area, in Alexandrina, Mount Compass Area School and Eastern Fleurieu Strathalbyn campus, are strong competitors in that competition, not only with cattle but with goats. I think some of them might have sheep, but wool and mohair. It's a big thing, and I urge any of you to go on Schools Day. The arena at the Royal Show is full of young people in agriculture doing with cattle and all these other things. But I will particularly draw attention to Mount Compass, who finished up getting a champion steer. And I thought that was a tremendous outcome, plus a whole lot of other things. A steer on the hoof, and I think they got a prize on the hook as well. But I just think that last year, I think Strathalbyn had a better year. This year they didn't do so well, but we have two schools that are doing a great job, and I think we ought to draw ASART's attention to it, because they really have done extremely well, particularly getting a championship. It's a fierce competition, and I think they've done well, and I think we should commend them for it.
Any further discussion on that report? No, so I'll just do this one. But do I put this recommendation to you? All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. We'll do the next one first, and then we'll do elected member, like we normally do, verbal updates, because it's a bit different, the agenda now. So 9.3 is a council member activity report from Councillor Melissa Rebbeck, and there's a recommendation that the report be received. Moved Councillor Gardner. Seconder, Councillor Scott. Any discussion? Not that she's here to answer the question, but no. So I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? That's carried unanimously. Now, yeah, we don't have, we have to tidy the agenda, but we get used to it. So now, are there any elected members' verbal updates that they would like to give us? Councillor Cummins.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Parkes. And I think I'd better read this one. It is, I'd like to report and share a matter with members in relation to an attack on my character and my integrity. It is the first time in my very long time service as a community volunteer in Lions, Rotary, community sports clubs, in community safety programs and not-for-profit organisations like Meals on Wheels, as well as an elected member with now 3 councils, Marion, Onkaparinga and Alexandrina. This is in relation to the council at the last meeting endorsing Mayor Parkes as president of the LGA. I'm disappointed that a fellow councillor would write a defamative letter about me to the editor of the Southern Argus, in which he alleges that comments I made at the last council in relation to the costs to this council if Mayor Parkes was elected to the position of president of the LGA were untrue. At that meeting, I opposed endorsing Mayor Parkes for president of the LGA because the financial business case on behalf of our long-suffering ratepayers of Alexandrina did not stack up, and as it would be just another cost burden on them with little or no benefit. I simply provided evidence of additional costs for a deputy mayor and the additional fuel and maintenance costs for the significant travel requirements in the expensive vehicle that Alexandrina Council provides for the mayor, and that council is totally responsible for funding. However, Councillor Carter in his published letter states that all expenses incurred by Keith Parkes in the performance of the LGA president are refunded to council, so there are no costs to council whatsoever. He also states that costs involved in installing a deputy mayor is within council, and therefore there are no costs involved. I'll take the second one first in relation to the position of deputy mayor. Notwithstanding that the deputy mayor is elected from within the elected body, blind Freddie knows that, but if the writer had listened to the tape recording of the meeting, he would have heard that I said extra costs of a deputy mayor, not election costs as reported in the Southern Argus. I should add that the editor of the Southern Argus rang me last week to apologise for misquoting me. They rely on handheld recording device because Council's audio recording is not published in time for the editorial headlines. I think they are a reputable publication because they will be publishing a retraction and an apology on page 2 of this week's edition. So Mayor Parkes is on the record as saying that if he were to be successful as the president of the LGA, that he would be seeking a deputy mayor. In other words, he will no longer be a full-time mayor, attracting an allowance of 4 times that of councillor, which is about $76,000. He will be a part-time mayor, but still being paid that same allowance, plus of course an allowance as president of the LGA of some $50,000 or $60,000. My words were, if we have a deputy mayor, there are extra costs, not election costs. I was quite clear in what I said. So extra costs are 1.25% additional allowance above a councillor. Alexandrina is in Group 2, so the allowance will be $19,110 plus 1.25 equals $23,887.50 or $4,777.50 in additional costs. What about his statement that there are no costs to council for travelling as it is reimbursed by the LGA? So I'll refer you to the LGA Board and Committee Member Expense Reimbursement, GP02, Clause 3.6 on page 1 states, where a board committee member is provided a fully funded vehicle to undertake their council role, no reimbursement for travel expenditure associated with the use of this vehicle will be made by the LGA. It further states in clause 4.2.5 on page 2, it is recognised that in many cases a board member also holds the position of mayor or chairperson and their respective council provides them a vehicle with all associated expenses associated with this vehicle being paid for by their council. In other words, this council will be up for any costs involved in travel to and from. So the distance from Goolwa to Adelaide is 83 kilometres, 78 cents per kilometre equals about $130. 7 times a month, which is what you quoted, Mayor Parkes, equals $11,000 per year. I would also expect that if he is a right and proper president, he will visit a number of the 68 councils during the 2 years, so the $13,000 to ratepayers could be twice or 3 times that. So again, there are additional costs that our ratepayers have to bear. So the statements I made during the council meeting are absolutely true, and I've provided substantiating evidence as to its accuracy. Unfortunately then, the statements in the letter are incorrect and indeed under the law would be considered defamatory. So through you, Mayor Parkes, to Councillor Carter, I expect if he is at least a bit honourable, I expect that he would be writing a retraction of his allegations made towards me in his letter to the editor and include a public apology. One thing I retain after this election and after 4 years' service is my integrity and good character. Thank you.
I'll just clarify a few things there. The LGA may say that they don't reimburse expenses, but they do. And they've reimbursed any expenses I've incurred during my time on the board have been reimbursed. I would say you don't need to worry about it. To be quite frank, I don't think I'll be the president of the LGA, and we'll know tomorrow at 9:30 when they draw the ballot. But I believe, as I've stated publicly, Mayor Erica Vickery, who's my very good friend, and the Mayor of Narracourt-Lucendale will be the president, and I'm convinced of that. And so, and I'm looking forward to it because I support her 100% in gaining that role. So, we've always had a deputy mayor until this term, and the idea of the deputy mayor was to change the deputy mayor each year to give people an opportunity to get experience moving forward. And I've always been and always will be, as long as I'm in the chair, a full-time mayor. So to suggest that I won't be full-time is incorrect. In fact, I will have more time if I'm re-elected in my role as mayor, because many of the committees that I'm on now and the board of the LGA and SAROC, I will no longer be sitting on those boards. I don't intend to nominate for them, and I never intended to. And I made that undertaking 2 years ago when we instated the current board. So I will have a lot more time to spend in Alexandrina, I can guarantee you, and I'll be spending it as the mayor, as I've always promised our community I would. So I don't appreciate the fact that I'm being told I'm not going to when I damn well am. And I love my role, and I will continue to give it 100%. But after tomorrow, nobody will need to worry about it because Erica will be the president. So thank you.
I think I just need to make one extra comment, and it's not about you being appointed or not being appointed. It's the fact that Councillor Carter defamed me in his letter to the Southern Argus. I reject that totally. I will not accept that. I've worked too many years in community service to have an allegation like that. So I want it retracted, and I want an apology. Nothing else. I've got two other matters to raise.
I'm not disputing that. I'm not disputing what you're saying there. I'm just clarifying the point of my personal involvement with the LGA and my role and the time I commit to my role. That's all. That needs to be clarified. Any further before Councillor Carter?
Yes. I'd like to say that, yes, I did misquote or got something wrong, and that was the fact that any expenses to a deputy mayor adds to the money. But apart from that, if Councillor Coomans reads that article properly, what I said was remarks that were attributed to him in that newspaper, and that's what I answered. Nothing more, nothing less. So the only thing that I apologise for is not mentioning that the extra allowances that are given to a deputy mayor. Thank you.
Did you have something more to add?
Yeah, I've got a couple of others, and sorry, I don't accept that at all. I've got the article here. If you like, I could read it to you. The other one I had was the. This is the last meeting of this council before.
There's one more.
Oh, is it?
There's a special meeting on the 7th.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll hold my compliments until then. The only thing I'd like to then let the members know that tomorrow night there is a candidates forum at the Clayton Bay Community Hall at 7 o'clock for the Alexandrina South candidates and the mayoral candidates, and I'll be hosting that like I did at the Middleton one. And I think I was pretty fair at the Middleton one for all the candidates. Thank you.
Councillor Scott.
If the next meeting is a special meeting, then am I right in saying that the only business you can conduct at a special meeting is the business for which that meeting was called, and therefore this will be the last meeting where there is general comment, and just a point in relation to what Councillor Coomans just said, he would hold it over. If he does, I'm asking, he may not even be allowed to do that, because if it's a special meeting, you stick to special meeting guidelines. That's all. Just
we can. Nigel says we can handle that within the agenda. A provision for that. Okay. And there could very well be another item that needs to be put in between now and then. That's right. Yeah. So, any more verbal updates? No. So item 10 is confidential items. Thank you. So we need to have to move that we move into confidence. Move Councillor Farrier. Seconder, Councillor Maidment. All those in favour? Against? It's carried unanimously.
South Coast Television, your community, your voice.